name's Evan Chamberlain. I'm a glass blower, and this is my shop. Welcome. This is where I work most every day when I'm not doing other stuff or taking things to and from clients. I use a Carlisle CC, which is the type of torch that's sitting over there. It runs off of oxygen and propane, stored outside, and this is a small kiln called an F240, and this is basically where I make everything. You can see over here I got a lot of glass color under the bench here where I work, and just raw tubes. So these tubes are the base material for everything really, and glass blowing pretty much revolves around making everything into a bubble. So as you can kind of look at a tube, it's pretty easy to turn a tube into little sections that are bubbles, and that is a pretty universal thing about all kinds of glass. I've been doing it since I was about 16 years old, and I say about because that's when I took like a class at a studio downtown in Seattle, and through that I got to meet some people that had done it for a long time and had jobs where you could work in a lighting factory, and got to see a little bit of industrially like what your job would be if you're a glass blower in a large factory, and likewise I've seen different shops where all they make is specific art projects for people that are kind of one of a kinds, and different sort of work basically. And this kind of glass blowing is actually really different than what I started out doing. I started out learning with a furnace and pipes, and that sort of way of doing things it's gotten a lot more expensive over the last 20 years. Well, I haven't really been doing 20 years, but over 15 years. It's gotten much more expensive, and it's made it so that most people have to come up with alternatives, and this way of working glass uses a lot less energy because it's not using a furnace. We're just using a kiln that keeps the glass hot. It takes about half the amount of heat to do that, and the torch itself is the only thing that gets extremely hot, so it's just a little more controlled and maybe a little harder to do some things because it doesn't you don't have the versatility of having a lot of glass that's hot, but you can make quite a lot of stuff with this because this glass is a lot more temperature resistant to changes in temperature. Like you can make laboratory equipment out of it and other things that you wouldn't really be able to do with glass that you normally would get in a furnace. Another thing to mention is my mother she was a glass blower too. That's part of the I got to see it as a kid and learn about it, and I love that it's something where most of the value is really derived from how much you've figured out how to do with it. It's not really about what the material is worth, in raw costs like the color and the pipes, the tubes themselves. It's about how much you can combine them the right way to make it valuable, basically, and that's kind of makes it more like something like a trick, I would say, than a lot of other forms of art. Some parts of that would be annoying, but I think a really fun part about it is it's a lot like learning a different skill with your hands and practicing the same things that sort of compound on each other, and as you get better at certain things, you get tired of them, and then you stop doing them, and you kind of develop asymmetrically if you do a lot of glass blowing. And I like that about it, because it gives you freedom to stop and start different techniques. Glass never really goes bad. So if you do something you like and you don't know what to do with it, you can save it for months or years and come back to it, and it's totally exactly the same. I think there's a lot of things that are cool about it. I think also just the amount of colors that exist that are really profound. I would also say just the way it moves while it's hot is pretty unique. I don't think anything else really behaves like glass. It's a little bit like a metal that you can continually re-weld as long as you haven't heated it up for hours on end and blown it in and out. It does have certain limits, but it's like a metal that has its own flux built into it, so the entire thing can be reformed pretty effortlessly with just air, and that's what makes it different. I don't think anything else works that way. I like ceramics and metals, stuff like that, but they're both truly very different than this, I would say. I think it's always good for people to appreciate that it's just a really hard, it's a really hard thing to get in the door at. It's a really hard thing to find people who will employ you to do it. And on top of that, once you've found ways to get good at it and done all of those other things, it's hard to start a business and convince people to pay, what they have to pay for the product, because it costs more than something would ever cost from a factory, basically. If you're hand making any kind of glass, it's going to require a lot more work and consideration. It might look a lot cooler, but you always have to be prepared for the fact that even people who really like it, it's something that's out of reach for a lot of people to afford. So the next best thing you can do is kind of just at least show people how it's made, give people some sort of educational value out of something that's kind of it's becoming a harder and harder thing to do for a lot of people just because of the costs. And yeah, I just think I really love doing it. It's really a creative form of art. It's really fun, and I also think it's kind of an equal part design medium, so it's not quite like something like painting. A lot of it, it's really about, you have to be the kind of person that wants to learn how to make things that are, like objects that you would use in your house and not just look at. And that's both fun and kind of hard about glass, especially bongs. I would say bongs are really intensively hard to design, because you have to make a whole thing that will shoot water through it, and it will have the right pressure through all the tubes, and it's got the right amount of air circulation, things like that. And on top of that, we do a little bit of things that involve making joints and connections between glass, which is also tricky. So you have to grind sections of glass together so that they can become airtight, and all of that stuff just takes a lot of time. You'll make a lot of mistakes when you first start doing it, but that's ultimately kind of what makes it fun too. Is it takes a lot of work, and once you're at the point where you can do fun things with it, you can take a lot of liability with what you want to try. I think that's unusual.